It began like any ordinary day in a quiet neighborhood where the sound of children playing and families going about their routines filled the air. But that day, in a small, unassuming house, the cries of a newborn echoed through the walls, a sound that should symbolize life, innocence, and hope. For 6-week-old Jaxon, it was the only way he knew to communicate his needs, his discomfort, his fragile existence. What followed, however, was an unimaginable chain of events that would leave a family shattered and a community struggling to make sense of a tragedy no one could have anticipated. Behind the closed doors of that house, choices were made in moments of frustration and weakness, choices that would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. How does a moment of desperation escalate into a life-ending act? What drives a person to lose control in the face of a child's cry, turning frustration into irreversible violence? These are the haunting questions that linger in the wake of Baby Jaxon's death. Questions that demand answers, not only to understand the circumstances of his loss, but to confront the deeper issues that allowed this tragedy to unfold. This is the story of a life taken far too soon, a family left in grief, and the search for accountability in a case that continues to resonate long after the headlines have faded. Welcome to True Crime Files, the channel where we uncover the most compelling and thought-provoking true crime stories. Here, we delve into the details behind the headlines, seeking to understand the events that shape lives and communities forever. If you're passionate about justice, storytelling, and uncovering the truths hidden in the shadows, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Together, we'll explore the stories that need to be told and ensure that these voices are never forgotten. The story begins in a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where life unfolds at a steady pace, and familiarity offers a sense of security. It was a place where houses stood neatly, side by side, each one a small world of its own, filled with the hopes and struggles of the families within. Among these homes, there was one that blended into the background, unremarkable to anyone passing by. Inside that house lived a family navigating the joys and challenges of caring for a newborn. Baby Jaxon was just 6 weeks old. His arrival had brought the usual whirlwind of late nights, constant feeding, and the tender chaos that comes with welcoming a new life. His cries, like those of any newborn, were his way of expressing the only emotions he knew: hunger, discomfort, or the need to be held. For those who heard them, those cries should have been met with reassurance, care, and love. But that house, which appeared so ordinary from the outside, held a story far different from what anyone could imagine. The family, by all accounts, seemed unremarkable to those around them. They were not particularly well known in the neighborhood, and interactions with others were brief, friendly, but never revealing. Life appeared uneventful from the outside. A young couple adjusting to parenthood, their days likely consumed by the demands of their infant son. Yet, as is often the case, the surface told only part of the story. Behind the daily routines, beneath the shared smiles with neighbors, there was something that no one could have anticipated. On the morning in question, the sounds of everyday life filled the air. A passing car, a barking dog, the distant hum of children playing. But inside that house, the rhythm of the day was interrupted by the cries of a baby. Jaxon was inconsolable, as newborns often are, his small voice rising and falling, desperate for comfort. For reasons no one fully understands, that sound became a trigger. In an instant, the ordinary was shattered, and the life within those walls would never be the same. What unfolded in that moment would leave a permanent mark on this family, their neighbors, and the community as a whole. A decision was made, one that cannot be undone, and it is this decision that brings us here today to uncover how and why it happened, and to ask the questions that linger in the wake of such a devastating event. It was a day like any other, or at least it began that way. The morning light filtered through the windows, casting soft shadows on the walls. The hum of normalcy filled the air, the kind of background noise that signifies life going on, uninterrupted. But inside that small house, something was different. Tension lingered, unspoken yet unmistakable, growing as the hours passed. Baby Jaxon had been crying for much of the day. His small, fragile voice carried through the house, a desperate call for the only things he understood: warmth, food, and the comfort of being held. His cries weren't unusual for a baby his age, but that day, they seemed endless. To anyone who has cared for a newborn, those cries are familiar, even expected. A test of patience, yes, but also a reminder of the vulnerability of a life just beginning. But for Jackson's father, those cries became more than a test. They became something he could no longer endure. As the minutes turned into hours, the sound grew louder in his mind. No longer just the cries of an infant, but an overwhelming presence that seemed to fill every corner of the house. The weight of exhaustion bore down on him. Sleepless nights and frayed nerves had taken their toll, and in that moment, his frustration reached a breaking point. He walked into the room where Jaxon lay, his movements quick and agitated. The baby's small face was red with the effort of crying, tiny fists clenched in distress. Jackson's father reached out, not with the gentle hands of a caregiver, but with hands driven by frustration and anger. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds, but its impact would last forever. He picked Jaxon up, his grip too firm, his movements too rough. In his desperation to quiet the cries, he acted without thought, without restraint. Shaking the baby, he shouted, his voice rising above the cries. He wasn't thinking of the harm, only of stopping the sound. But a 6-week-old infant is fragile in ways he could not, or would not, consider in that moment of anger. The force of his actions caused Jaxon to go silent, not because he was comforted, but because his small body could no longer bear the trauma. The room fell quiet, the sudden silence as heavy as the sound that had filled it moments before. He froze, staring down at his child, the weight of what had just happened sinking in with agonizing clarity. Panic replaced anger as he tried to undo what could not be undone. He called for help, his voice trembling, but it was too late. Baby Jaxon's cries would never be heard again. When paramedics arrived, they found a father frantic and a baby unresponsive. Efforts were made to revive him, but the injuries were too severe. Jaxon was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was irreversible. The medical team could only confirm what everyone feared. Jaxon was gone. In those fleeting moments of anger, a choice was made that ended a life and altered countless others. What should have been a moment of care and tenderness became an act of violence that no one could take back. The community would soon learn of the tragedy and questions would arise, questions that would lead to a deeper examination of what happened in that quiet house on that ordinary day. Within hours of the tragic incident, the police arrived at the scene, their presence marking the beginning of a painful journey for everyone involved. At first, the cause of Jaxon's death seemed clear, but as the investigation unfolded, more unsettling details came to light. The frantic calls for help, the rush to the hospital, the desperation that followed, these were all part of a larger picture that had yet to be fully understood. The authorities began their questioning with Jackson's father, the man who had been with the baby during those crucial moments. At first, he spoke of the overwhelming frustration, of the inability to calm his crying son. But as the questions continued, the details started to change. What had begun as a story of a momentary lapse in judgment soon revealed itself to be something far more complex. The investigators found inconsistencies in his account, small details that, when pieced together, painted a clearer picture of what had happened. Medical professionals confirmed the worst. Jackson's injuries were severe, far beyond what could be explained by a simple misstep. The shaking, the force exerted on his small body, left marks that couldn't be ignored. The truth became inescapable. Jaxon had been the victim of abuse in his most vulnerable moments. The medical examiner reported that the baby had suffered from head trauma, bruising, and signs of physical abuse. These findings didn't just confirm the cause of death, but they also added another layer to the tragedy, the undeniable truth that a life had been taken not by accident, but by the hands of the one person who should have protected him the most. As the investigation continued, the community was left to process what had happened in the home. Neighbors, who had once greeted the family with smiles and exchanged pleasantries, were now left questioning everything they thought they knew. How could this happen? How could someone entrusted with the care of a helpless child allow such a thing to unfold? The shock was evident in every conversation, in every passing glance. Many could not fathom how someone could turn to violence in a moment of stress, especially against a helpless infant. The anger, however, was not just directed at the father, but at a system that had failed to see the warning signs. In the weeks that followed, local advocates for child welfare and mental health began speaking out, urging for a deeper examination of the circumstances that led to this tragedy. The discussion shifted to broader issues about mental health, about the pressures parents face, and about the need for better support systems for families in crisis. Was this a case of a father pushed too far by exhaustion and stress? Or was it the result of a deeper issue, something that could have been prevented with more help, more intervention? As the case moved through the legal system, the community watched with bated breath. Would justice be served? Could anything undo the damage that had been done? The courtroom became a battleground for emotions, grief, anger, and sorrow. Families mourned the loss of a child, and yet there was another layer of heartbreak for the family that had to come to terms with the reality of what one of their own had done. The case left an indelible mark on everyone who followed it. It sparked new conversations about child abuse prevention, the importance of mental health resources, and the ways in which society needs to better support those in need before it's too late. The tragic death of Jaxon was not just a local story. It became a catalyst for broader discussions about the hidden struggles parents face and the devastating consequences that can unfold when those struggles go unaddressed. Stories like this leave us with questions that don't have easy answers, but ones we cannot afford to ignore. What could have been done to prevent such a devastating outcome? Could early intervention or support for the family have made a difference? These are the kinds of questions that linger long after the headlines fade and the courtrooms go quiet. This case forces us to think about the larger picture, about the systems in place, or the lack thereof, that allow tragedies like this to happen. Was there a moment when someone could have stepped in, noticed the signs, and changed the course of events? And if so, why didn't that happen? It's easy to look back with hindsight, but the real challenge is figuring out how to recognize these moments in real time before it's too late. For you, the viewer, this story isn't just one to listen to and move on from. It's a reminder of how fragile life is, how important it is to reach out to those who might be struggling, and how vital it is to ensure that help is available to those who need it most. We want to hear from you. What do you think could have prevented this tragedy? Could better access to mental health resources, parenting support, or community programs have made a difference? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And then there's the question of justice. Do you believe it was served in this case? Did the legal outcome provide accountability? Or does the loss of a life like Jaxon's leave wounds that no sentence could ever heal? Your perspective matters. Let us know your thoughts. If you believe in the importance of shedding light on stories like this, click the like button and share this video so others can join the conversation. But more than anything, this is a story that underscores the importance of awareness, empathy, and action. It's not just about recounting what happened. It's about learning from it, about finding ways to create a world where tragedies like this don't have to happen again. As difficult as it is to confront these truths, it's necessary if we want to build a future where every child is safe and every family has the support they need to thrive. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being a part of this vital conversation. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to join us as we uncover more stories, each one a piece of the puzzle we all need to understand. Together, we can make a difference one story at a time.